Welcome to Worcester, the city that reads. I'm Hank Stoltz, and we're speaking with Shawn Cormier, the author of Nomadin. And Shawn, you had just set this up for us. So this is the story. Give us that one line again to set this series of books up.
It's the story of a young boy considered the savior who discovers he might be the devil instead.
Aha. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about this whole world that you had to create. And obviously, I'm guessing some of your influences, Tolkien and others in the fantasy genre. Yes,
Tolkien, Terry Brooks. When I was young, I read anything and everything fantasy. And of course, when I was younger, there weren't shelves and shelves and shelves of fantasy books to choose from. I think Tolkien and Brooks really opened up the field.
Interesting, though, now Tolkien with his whole world and coming up with the different languages and everything, but Terry Brooks with that real humor that he has that runs throughout his books as well. Do you sort of weld the two together? Do you borrow little parts from each?
Well, I think you do. I think it's inevitable that the more you read, the more you're influenced by authors. And again, going back to the young people I speak with, I tell them read as much as you can, because if you only read 3 books and that's your influence, you won't have enough ingredients to create your own stew, for example, because you borrow from everybody, and if you don't borrow from enough and you don't have enough to make it your own, then it's just a copy.
Now that seems important to me, that you have to have enough to make it your own. You can pay homage to some of your influences, but you don't want somebody to pick it up and go, second-rate Tolkien. You want it to be your own world. How do you find that voice? And again, let us in a little bit more on the world of Nomadin.
My voice comes from my character, Ilian. When I first sat down and started writing about this young boy, he just wouldn't go away, and he kept calling to me. And in fact, he has driven much of the plot of the book. I'm not a big outliner. Unlike Brooks, who stresses outline, 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 I do vague, broad outlines, and then I let the characters lead me. And oftentimes, I have to stop and draw them back. But Ilian was such a powerful character inside me that he knew exactly what to say and exactly what to do. I had to control more of the outer characters and determine what they were going to do with this little boy than I had to control him.
Shawn, now, did you know how it was going to end? You say you're not a slave to the outline, but did you have the beginning and the ending?
I had the ending to the trilogy in my mind when I first started writing. The fun part is getting there, and most of the times when I'm in my pre-planning stages, it's daydreaming. And I will, like I used to sit down and write scenes, I dream up scenes. Scenes are the most important thing to me, exciting, action-packed scenes, and then I determine how to get there and why this particular moment in the book is so important. That's the creative part for me, and the characters often lead me there.
In fantasy, I mean, it's so often said that authors should write from what they know or they draw on their personal experiences. In fantasy, are you able to do that? Because, again, you've had to create an entire world for these characters to inhabit that is not the world that we inhabit every day.
Well, in fantasy, the world you create has to be true to itself. So if you look at Tolkien and Brooks, their world is very similar to our world, maybe set in a different archaic period, and they might have magic and different races, but they are akin to what is happening in our world and how our world works. That's the way this series is. I've created a world, but it's very similar to ours. There's nothing in there other than maybe a few creatures of fantasy that can't be solidly set in our world as well. And I think that helps draw the reader in. For me, it did when I was reading fantasy.
Now, the feedback that you have gotten on Nomadin, and we'll jump into the other 2 books in just a moment, what was the feedback that you began to get as an author, and how did it color you, perhaps, as you began to put together the other 2 books in the trilogy?
Well, you write these things, you don't know if anyone else is going to like them. I liked it. Of course, your immediate family will like it. But you put it out there, and then you start getting feedback from people. And of course, at first, you're a little cynical because you get back this positive feedback, and your mind says, well, of course no one's going to go out of their way to be mean to you. But in meeting the young people that actually read the book and receiving their emails, it's been a very rewarding experience for me, very rewarding. Some of the most rewarding experiences are the young people who relate to Ilian. You know, he's a little boy, often bullied, who is very headstrong and makes his way through his world. And I've met so many young people who said, I related to that. I've been bullied. I've had problems, and it's exciting to read about someone like me who solves these problems, and that's what the whole book's about.
Bring us to the sequel to Nomadin, Nomadin, and tell us a little bit about Nomadin. How did you set up Nomadin, this world that you have created, this character that you have now had your audience begin to identify with, and now bring him into Nomadin?
Well, that was simple because I left Nomadin. One of the biggest complaints from some readers is that I left Nomadin kind of hanging. The plot elements were finished, but I knew I wanted to go into a bigger world, a bigger plot. And so, being a new writer, I didn't quite have the chops again to pull that off. So I left it hanging, which led me instantly into Nomadin. You know, I could put the 3 books together into one book now because they flow right into each other.
Bring us up to date, because now, see, I understand what the reader then was saying. He said, well, wait a minute, you know, maybe I bought this book and I want to have some loose ends tied up. You're thinking trilogy all the way along, so you're bringing them right into the second book. When you were writing the second book, did you have that in your mind? Maybe I need to have a more finite resolution for book 2, even though you're always planning book 3.
Yeah, that was especially in my mind because as you're writing book 2, you're getting more and more feedback from book 1 from the readers, and the more that they tell you, yes, please give me something a little more substantial at the end, the more you have to listen to them. And then, you know, writing book 2 was more difficult because I didn't have a backstory. I had very limited backstory in book 1. I could do whatever I wanted and make the characters who they were going to be, and in book 2 you have to be true to book 1. And that was a completely new experience for me to have to refer back to what I wrote 2 years ago to make sure that me as the author knew that it was going to flow.
Because you know there is someone out there who has memorized every bit of that. It seems to be something about science fiction, fantasy, where the fans, I mean, they enjoy it so much, but they need that world to be true. And when you just said that, all I can think of is, you know, is William Shatner at one of his Star Trek conventions. In episode 49, was it possible for the dilithium crystals, Captain? And he doesn't know.
Right.
But you as the author, you really do better know. You better know. We're speaking with Shawn Cormier on Worcester, the City That Reads. We're talking about his trilogy of fantasy books that are out. Straight ahead, Shawn will give us how we can order them and tell us a little bit more about this plot line that runs through all 3 books, and we'll tell you about the 3rd book in the trilogy as well, right here on Worcester, the City That Reads.